Section 1. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what happens when the person you trusted most serves you betrayal on a silver platter, again and again? My name is Sarah, and for 15 years I believed I had the perfect marriage, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a life that looked picture perfect from the outside. But behind closed doors, my reality was crumbling. And the night of Marcus's 40th birthday party, everything came crashing down in a way nobody, especially him, could have ever predicted. Let me take you back to where it all began. Marcus and I met in college. He was charismatic, ambitious, driven, the kind of man who could walk into a room and own it within minutes. I fell hard and fast. We married young, built our lives together, and I supported him through every step of his career. When he wanted to start his own business, I worked 2 jobs to help fund it. When he needed to relocate for better opportunities, I left my family and friends behind without hesitation. I believed in us. I believed in him. But somewhere along the way, Marcus changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The business trips stretched longer. The affection between us grew colder. I told myself it was stress, that building a company required sacrifices. I convinced myself that once things settled down, we'd find our way back to each other. I was naive. I was blind, and I was about to pay the price for my trust. It started small, little things that didn't quite add up. Receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, perfume on his collar that wasn't mine. Phone calls he'd take in another room. When I'd ask him about these things, he'd get defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and insecure. He'd turn it around, making me feel guilty for even questioning him. And like a fool, I'd apologize. I'd tell myself I was overreacting, that my imagination was running wild. But a woman's intuition is rarely wrong. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I just wasn't ready to face it, not yet. Because facing it meant admitting that my entire life was built on lies, that the man I'd sacrificed everything for had betrayed me in the worst possible way. So I pushed those feelings down, buried them deep, and kept playing the role of the devoted wife. Then came the announcement. Marcus decided he wanted to throw himself a massive 40th birthday party, not just any party, a grand celebration with everyone who mattered in his business and social circles. He wanted it to be perfect, memorable, the kind of event people would talk about for years. And of course, he expected me to organize everything. Every detail, every arrangement, every guest list approval. Because that's what I did, right? I made his life easier. I made him look good. I threw myself into the planning. Maybe part of me hoped that this party would bring us closer again. That seeing me work so hard for him would remind him of what we had. But with each passing day, Marcus became more distant, more critical. Nothing I did was good enough. The venue wasn't impressive enough. The catering options weren't sophisticated enough. The guest list wasn't exclusive enough. He picked apart every decision I made, and with each criticism, something inside me hardened just a little bit more. 2 weeks before the party, I found the messages. I wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. Marcus had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. A notification popped up, and I glanced at it without thinking. It was from someone named Vanessa. The preview text made my blood run cold. I shouldn't have clicked. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I opened that conversation, and what I saw destroyed me. Months of messages. Intimate, detailed, undeniable. This wasn't just an affair. This was a relationship. Vanessa wasn't just some random woman. She was his business partner, someone I'd met multiple times at company events, someone who'd smiled to my face while stabbing me in the back. The messages went back over a year, a whole year of lies. A whole year of me being made a fool, but it got worse. So much worse, because as I scrolled through their conversation, I found messages about me. Marcus complaining about me to her, calling me boring, saying I'd let myself go, that I was holding him back. Vanessa laughing, encouraging him, suggesting he should just leave me, and Marcus, my husband of 15 years, agreeing, saying he would eventually, but not yet. Not until after the party, because he needed me to organize it first. He needed me to play the perfect wife one more time for his image. I sat at that kitchen counter, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face, reading message after message. Each one felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. This man I'd given everything to, this man I'd built my entire life around, saw me as nothing more than a convenient tool. Useful for keeping his life running smoothly, but ultimately disposable. And he was planning to discard me, just not quite yet. He needed me for one last performance. Something broke inside me that day. But something else was born. A cold, clear rage that burned away the tears and the heartbreak and the self-doubt. If Marcus wanted a performance, I'd give him one. If he wanted a party that people would remember forever, I'd make sure he got exactly that. Just not in the way he expected. I closed the laptop carefully, exactly as I'd found it. I dried my eyes, steadied my breathing, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't going to cry or beg or ask him why. Because I already knew why. And more importantly, I knew what I was going to do about it. Marcus thought I was weak, predictable, easy to manipulate. He had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that the woman he'd underestimated for so long was about to teach him the most valuable lesson of his life. Section 2. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life, but also the most clarifying. I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to smile at Marcus across the breakfast table, discuss party details with him, act like my world hadn't just imploded. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled. Every time he spoke to me, I heard his words to Vanessa echoing in my head. But I held it together, because I had a plan forming, and I needed time to execute it perfectly. First, I had to gather evidence. I couldn't just know about the affair, I needed proof. Solid, undeniable, legally sound proof. I went to see a lawyer, quietly, on a day Marcus thought I was shopping for a party dress. I laid out everything I knew, everything I'd seen. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, listened carefully and then gave me advice that changed everything. She told me exactly what I needed to document, how to protect my assets, and how to ensure that when this all came crashing down, I'd be standing on solid ground. I started copying everything. Every message I could access, every email, every photo. I documented Marcus's business accounts, his expenditures, his lies about where he was and who he was with. I created a detailed timeline of the affair. I gathered bank statements showing money he'd spent on Vanessa, gifts, trips, dinners at expensive restaurants. Money that came from our joint accounts. Money that was supposed to be for our future together. But I didn't stop there. I also started digging into Marcus's business. See, I'd always handled the administrative side of things, even after he brought on Vanessa as his partner. I had access to files, contracts, financial records. And as I looked closer, I started noticing discrepancies, things that didn't quite add up. Money moving in ways that seemed questionable. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but I made copies of everything and added it to my growing file. All the while, I continued planning the party. I booked the venue he wanted, a prestigious country club with stunning gardens and a grand ballroom. I arranged for the catering he demanded, 5-star cuisine with an open bar featuring top-shelf liquor. I sent out invitations to everyone on his carefully curated guest list. Business associates, potential clients, old friends, family members. I made sure every detail was exactly as he specified. Because this party was going to be perfect, just not for him. Marcus's mood improved as the party approached. He was excited, energized by the prospect of this grand celebration. He even started being nicer to me, in his own superficial way, complimenting my work on the arrangements, telling me I'd outdone myself. He had no idea that with each compliment, my resolve only strengthened. He thought he was winning. He thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. He couldn't have been more wrong. I also paid attention to Vanessa. She was, of course, invited to the party. As Marcus's business partner, her absence would have been suspicious. I watched how they interacted in public, careful to never show their true relationship. The stolen glances, the brief touches that could be explained away as friendly, the private jokes that excluded everyone else. It was all so calculated, so deliberate. They thought they were being subtle. They thought no one could see what was really happening. They were wrong about that too. 3 days before the party, I had my final meeting with Patricia. I handed her everything I'd gathered, every piece of evidence, every document, every screenshot. She reviewed it all carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. When she finally looked up at me, there was something like respect in her eyes. She told me I'd done good work. More than good, actually. What I'd uncovered wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was evidence of financial misconduct in Marcus's business. Money that had been moved inappropriately, possibly illegally. With what I'd gathered, Marcus wasn't just looking at a divorce. He was potentially looking at serious legal trouble. Patricia asked me what I wanted to do with the information. I could have gone the traditional route, filed for divorce quietly, used the evidence to ensure a favorable settlement. But that felt too easy, too private. Marcus had humiliated me, planning to cast me aside like I was nothing, while using me to maintain his perfect image. He deserved to feel that same humiliation. He deserved to have his carefully constructed facade torn down in front of everyone who mattered to him. So I told Patricia my plan. She was quiet for a long moment, then slowly smiled. She said it was risky, potentially messy, but if executed properly, absolutely devastating. Perfect. The day before the party, Marcus was practically glowing with anticipation. He kept checking details with me, making sure everything was ready. I assured him it was. Everything was perfect, everything was in place. He had no reason to doubt me. After all, I'd never given him one before. I'd always been reliable, dependable Sarah, the woman who made his life work while he took all the credit. But tomorrow, that would change. Tomorrow, everyone would see the real Marcus. And the real me. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, going over every detail of what was about to happen. Part of me was terrified. What I was planning to do would blow up my life in ways I couldn't fully predict. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger over the past 2 weeks, felt calm. Clear. Ready. Marcus had made his choices. Now he would face the consequences. And I would finally be free. Section 3. The day of the party arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, warm sunshine, a gentle breeze. It was the kind of day that made everything look beautiful, that made you believe good things were possible. Marcus was up early, more excited than I'd seen him in years. He kept talking about how this was going to be the event of the year, how impressed everyone would be. He was so focused on himself, on his image, that he barely looked at me, which was fine. Better, actually, because I needed him unsuspecting. I needed him relaxed and confident right up until the moment his world came crashing down. I spent the morning getting ready, taking my time. I chose my outfit carefully, a stunning red dress that Marcus had always loved on me. I did my hair, my makeup, making sure I looked absolutely perfect, because today wasn't about hiding anymore. Today was about standing tall and watching justice unfold. When Marcus saw me, he actually seemed surprised. He told me I looked beautiful, almost like he'd forgotten I could. I smiled and thanked him, letting him believe everything was fine. Letting him walk into his own trap, completely unaware. We arrived at the country club early to make sure everything was set up properly. The venue looked spectacular. White tablecloths, elegant centerpieces, soft lighting. The catering staff was preparing the food. The bar was fully stocked. The DJ was setting up his equipment. Everything looked exactly as Marcus had envisioned. He walked through the space with a satisfied smile, nodding his approval. He shook my hand, actually shook it like I was a vendor he was pleased with, and told me I'd done a good job. I just smiled. He had no idea. Guests started arriving around 6. They came dressed in their finest, bearing gifts and well wishes. Business associates Marcus was trying to impress, old friends from college, family members who'd traveled from out of state, and, of course, Vanessa. She arrived fashionably late, wearing a dress that was just a bit too revealing for a professional event. She greeted Marcus with a hug that lasted just a fraction too long, and I watched the way his hand lingered on her back. They thought they were being discreet. They weren't. I played my role perfectly. The gracious hostess, welcoming everyone, making sure they had drinks, directing them to the hors d'oeuvres. People complimented me on the party, on how beautiful everything looked. They told me what a wonderful wife I was, how lucky Marcus was to have me. I accepted their compliments with a smile, all while watching the clock, waiting for the right moment. Because timing was everything. Strike too early and people wouldn't be invested enough. Too late and they might start leaving. But right in the middle, after dinner when everyone was relaxed and happy, that was when I would make my move. Dinner was served at 7:30. A gorgeous meal, perfectly prepared, everything Marcus had requested. The food was excellent, the wine flowed freely, and the conversation buzzed with energy. Marcus was in his element, moving from table to table, charming everyone, basking in their attention. Vanessa sat at a table with other business associates, but I noticed how often her eyes found Marcus across the room, how they'd smile at each other when they thought no one was looking. It would have broken my heart if I'd had any heart left to break, but that part of me was already gone. What remained was cold, focused determination. After dessert was served and cleared, the DJ started playing music and the dance floor opened up. This was the traditional time for speeches and toasts. Several of Marcus's friends and business partners stood up to say a few words, sharing stories, making jokes, wishing him well. Marcus ate it up, loving every moment of attention. Finally, he stood up himself to give a speech. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about his journey, his success, his wonderful life, and then he made a point of thanking me. His devoted wife who'd supported him through everything, who'd made this perfect evening possible. The crowd applauded. I stood up and smiled, accepting the recognition, and then I did something Marcus wasn't expecting. I asked if I could say a few words too. Marcus looked surprised but nodded, gesturing for me to go ahead. Why wouldn't he? I was his supportive wife. Of course I'd want to say something nice about him on his special day. He had no reason to suspect anything different. I walked to the front of the room, taking the microphone from him. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Over 100 people, all waiting to hear what sweet sentiments I was going to share. I took a deep breath, looked directly at Marcus, and began to speak. Section 4. I started conventionally enough. I talked about how Marcus and I had met in college, young and full of dreams. How we'd built a life together, side by side, facing challenges and celebrating victories. The crowd smiled, nodding along with the familiar story. Marcus looked pleased, probably thinking I was about to deliver some touching tribute that would make him look even better. But then I shifted gears. I talked about sacrifice, about what it means to support someone unconditionally. To put your own dreams on hold so theirs can flourish. To work multiple jobs so they can start their business. To move away from everything familiar so they can chase opportunities. I talked about trust. About believing in someone completely, having faith that they value you as much as you value them. My voice was calm, steady, but something in my tone was making people shift uncomfortably in their seats. They sensed something was coming but couldn't quite figure out what. Then I said it. I said that trust is a precious thing, and when it's broken, when it's betrayed, the damage is irreparable. The room got very quiet. Marcus's smile faltered. I saw confusion flash across his face, then the first hint of worry. But it was too late for him to stop me now. I had the microphone and everyone's attention. And I was just getting started. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projection system we'd set up for showing photos during a party. The large screen behind me, which had been displaying a slideshow of Marcus throughout the years, suddenly changed. Now it showed screenshots. Messages between Marcus and Vanessa. Intimate, explicit, undeniable. The crowd gasped. People's mouths fell open. All eyes moved from the screen to Marcus, who had gone completely pale. I scrolled through them slowly, giving everyone time to read. Messages about their affair. Messages about me, mocking me, diminishing me. Plans they'd made together, lies Marcus had told. Every piece of evidence I gathered over the past 2 weeks now displayed for everyone to see. Marcus tried to speak, tried to interrupt, but his voice came out as a strangled sound. He looked at Vanessa, who had turned bright red and looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. He looked back at me, and in his eyes, I saw panic. Pure, desperate panic. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I changed the screen again, this time showing financial documents. Bank statements, transaction records, expense reports. I explained, in simple terms that everyone could understand, how Marcus had been using company funds inappropriately. How he'd been moving money in ways that were questionable at best and possibly illegal at worst. How his business success, the thing he was so proud of, was potentially built on fraudulent practices. The crowd's shock turned to horror. These weren't just personal scandals anymore. This was serious. This could destroy not just Marcus's reputation, but his entire career. Marcus finally found his voice. He started shouting, demanding I stop, calling me crazy, telling everyone I was lying out of spite. But the evidence was right there on the screen behind me. Undeniable. Irrefutable. His own words, his own actions, his own signatures on documents. People weren't looking at me like I was crazy. They were looking at him with disgust, disappointment, anger. His carefully cultivated image was crumbling in real time, right in front of everyone he'd wanted to impress. I then addressed Vanessa directly. I asked her how it felt to build a relationship on lies and betrayal. I asked if she really thought Marcus would be faithful to her when he'd proven he couldn't be faithful to his wife of 15 years. I told her that she was welcome to him because I was done. I was filing for divorce, and she could deal with the consequences of her choices. Vanessa couldn't even look at me. She grabbed her purse and literally ran from the room, tears streaming down her face. Several other guests started leaving too, not wanting to be part of the spectacle anymore. Marcus's family members were in shock. His mother was crying. His father looked like he wanted to punch him. His siblings were angry, embarrassed, hurt on my behalf. His business associates were pulling away, already calculating how his scandals would affect their own reputations and investments. In the span of maybe 10 minutes, I'd watched Marcus's entire world collapse, his reputation destroyed, his relationships shattered, his business in jeopardy. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd cared about more than our marriage, was now in ruins. And through it all, I remained calm. Composed. I handed the microphone to the DJ and walked off the platform. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with my head high, my shoulders back, moving through the crowd of stunned guests. Some reached out to touch my arm, to offer support, to tell me they were sorry. I thanked them quietly and kept moving, because I needed to leave before the adrenaline wore off, before the full weight of what I'd just done hit me. Section 5. I walked out of that country club and drove straight to a hotel where I'd already booked a room. I'd planned this part too, knowing I couldn't go back home that night. As soon as I closed the hotel room door behind me, my legs gave out. I sank to the floor, my whole body shaking. Everything I'd been holding in for weeks, all the pain and anger and heartbreak, came pouring out. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was empty and exhausted and numb. My phone started ringing almost immediately, Marcus calling over and over, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to desperate to pleading. I didn't answer. I didn't listen to the messages. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with them, just like I'd had to live with the consequences of trusting him. But it wasn't just Marcus calling. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from other people. Some were from friends and family offering support. Others were from reporters. Somehow the story had already started spreading on social media. Someone at the party had recorded parts of my speech and posted it online. It was going viral. People were calling it the ultimate revenge, a public betrayal exposed in the most dramatic way possible. Within hours, Marcus's name was trending on social media. And not in a good way. The next morning I met with Patricia. She'd already heard what happened. The whole city had heard what happened. She told me that my public revelation had complicated things legally, but not in a bad way. If anything, it strengthened my position. With so much evidence now public, Marcus would have a much harder time fighting the divorce or trying to hide assets. And as for the financial misconduct I'd exposed, well, authorities were already looking into it. Marcus's problems were much bigger than just a failed marriage now. Over the next few days, I watched from a distance as Marcus's life continued to fall apart. His business partners started distancing themselves, some even filing lawsuits. Major clients canceled their contracts. The company he'd built, the one I'd helped him create with my time and money and unwavering support, was collapsing. Vanessa resigned, probably trying to save whatever was left of her own reputation. Not that it worked. She'd been exposed right alongside Marcus, and the professional world has a long memory for scandals like this. Marcus tried to spin a narrative, claiming I'd manipulated the evidence, that I was a vengeful ex trying to destroy him, but it didn't work. Too many people had seen the proof with their own eyes. Too many people knew the truth. His attempts to play the victim only made him look worse, more desperate. Meanwhile, I had an outpouring of support. Women reached out to share their own stories of betrayal, telling me I'd inspired them to stand up for themselves. It was overwhelming and humbling and helped me realize that what I'd done wasn't just about me and Marcus. It was bigger than that. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Marcus didn't have much leverage to fight with. The affair was proven. The misuse of marital funds was documented. His lawyers advised him to settle rather than drag things out in court where even more of his misconduct might be exposed. I got the house, a significant portion of the assets, and my freedom. Patricia had done her job well. I walked away from that marriage in a much better position than Marcus had ever intended for me. But money and assets weren't really what mattered. What mattered was that I'd reclaimed my dignity. I'd refused to be the silent, convenient victim he'd expected me to be. I'd stood up for myself in the most public, undeniable way possible. And in doing so, I'd not only gotten justice for myself, but I'd warned every other woman in Marcus's orbit about exactly who he really was. Did I feel guilty about humiliating him so publicly? Sometimes, in quiet moments, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If I should have handled things more privately. But then I'd remember his messages about me. How he'd laughed with Vanessa about how easy I was to manipulate, how he'd planned to use me one last time before throwing me away. And I'd remember that I'd simply given him exactly what he'd asked for, a party people would never forget. A defining moment in his 40th year. He just hadn't expected to be defined by his own betrayal and downfall. Section 6. Months passed. The dust slowly settled, though the ripples of that night continued to spread. Marcus's business never recovered. He ended up selling what was left of it for a fraction of what it had been worth. The legal investigations into his financial practices resulted in fines and penalties, though he managed to avoid criminal charges. He moved to another city, trying to start over somewhere where people didn't immediately recognize his name and associate it with scandal. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he blamed me for everything, that he convinced himself he was the real victim in all of this. I wasn't surprised. People like Marcus rarely take responsibility for their actions. As for Vanessa, her career in our city was effectively over. No one wanted to work with someone who'd so publicly been exposed as unethical and untrustworthy. She tried to rebrand herself, starting fresh in a new industry, but the internet is forever. Her name was permanently linked to the scandal. I didn't take any pleasure in her suffering, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She'd made her choices knowing they would hurt another person. Actions have consequences. My own healing was slower and more complicated than I'd expected. For so long, my identity had been tied to being Marcus's wife. When that ended, I had to figure out who Sarah actually was outside of that role. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. I started therapy, working through the pain and betrayal, learning to trust my own judgment again. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned. I rediscovered parts of myself that I'd buried or forgotten. The most unexpected outcome of everything was the platform it gave me. Remember how I mentioned my story going viral? Well, that attention didn't just fade away. I started getting invited to speak at events, to share my story with others who'd experienced betrayal and were trying to find the courage to stand up for themselves. At first, I was hesitant. The last thing I wanted was to be defined by what Marcus had done to me. But then I realized that my story wasn't really about him. It was about resilience, about refusing to be diminished, about the power of truth and the importance of self-respect. I wrote a blog about my experience, not focusing on the revenge aspect, but on the journey from betrayal to empowerment. It resonated with thousands of people. They shared their own stories, their own struggles with toxic relationships and difficult decisions. I found purpose in that connection, in knowing that my pain could help others feel less alone in theirs. It didn't erase what Marcus had done, but it transformed it into something meaningful. Dating again was challenging. Trust doesn't come easily after being betrayed the way I was, but eventually I met someone. Someone patient and kind who understood that I came with scars and baggage. Someone who proved through consistent actions, not just words, that they valued me. It was different from what I had with Marcus. Quieter, more stable, built on mutual respect rather than grand gestures and empty promises. And it was better, so much better. Looking back now, 2 years after that fateful party, I can see how much I've grown. The woman I am today is stronger, wiser, more careful about who she gives her trust to. But she's also more confident, more independent, more aware of her own worth. Marcus thought he could use me and discard me without consequences. He thought I was weak and predictable. He was wrong on both counts. And his mistake became my liberation. Section 7. People often ask me if I regret how I handled things. If I wish I'd confronted Marcus privately instead of making it such a public spectacle. The honest answer is complicated. Do I wish the betrayal had never happened? Of course. Do I wish I'd never wasted 15 years of my life with someone who didn't truly value me? Absolutely. But given that those things did happen, given that I was in that situation, do I regret my response? No. I don't. Here's what I've learned. When someone betrays you, especially someone you've trusted completely, you're left with a choice. You can internalize that betrayal, let it make you feel small and worthless and broken. You can accept their narrative about you, believe their lies about your value, or you can refuse to carry their shame. You can stand up and say, loudly and clearly, "This is what was done to me and I will not pretend it didn't happen. I will not protect the reputation of someone who didn't protect my heart." Was my method extreme? Maybe. Was it calculated? Absolutely. But it was also honest. Everything I revealed that night was true. I didn't exaggerate or fabricate anything. I simply brought Marcus's own actions into the light. If he was humiliated by that revelation, it wasn't because of anything I did. It was because of what he did. His choices, his betrayal, his lies. I just refused to keep covering for him. I think that's what really scared Marcus and people like him. Not the exposure itself, but the fact that I refused to play along with the pretense anymore. So many betrayed partners stay quiet because they're afraid. Afraid of being judged, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of the mess that comes with truth-telling. And betrayers count on that fear. They count on their partners prioritizing peace and propriety over justice. Marcus counted on me being too polite, too concerned with his reputation, too worried about what people would think. He was wrong. There's a quote I came across during my healing journey that really resonated with me. It says, "Setting yourself on fire to keep others warm is not kindness, it's self-destruction." That's what I'd been doing for years. Burning myself up to keep Marcus comfortable, sacrificing my needs, my feelings, my dignity to maintain his image. And what did it get me? Pain. Betrayal. Plans to be discarded the moment I was no longer useful. The night of that party, I stopped setting myself on fire. I let Marcus feel the cold that came from his own actions. And yes, everyone else felt it too. His family, his business associates, his social circle. They all had to face the uncomfortable truth about who he really was. Some people criticized me for that, saying I'd hurt innocent people with my revelation. But were they really innocent? Or were they complicit in their ignorance, choosing not to see what they didn't want to know? Either way, ignorance isn't innocence, and protecting it isn't kindness. I also think about the message my actions sent to my future self and to other women watching. If I'd handled things quietly, if I'd slipped away with a private divorce and a settlement agreement with non-disclosure clauses, what would that have taught me? That my feelings didn't matter, that protecting Marcus's reputation was more important than my own healing, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity I could privately salvage. No. That wasn't the lesson I wanted to learn or teach. Section 8, instead, I learned that my voice matters. That truth, even uncomfortable truth, especially uncomfortable truth, has value. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to participate in your own diminishment. These lessons have shaped who I've become. They've influenced how I show up in all my relationships now. I don't shrink myself to make others comfortable anymore. I don't swallow my truth to keep the peace. I don't accept crumbs and call it love. The ripple effects of that night continue to surprise me. Women I've never met send me messages about how my story gave them courage to leave toxic relationships. Some tell me they used my approach, exposing betrayal in their own ways. Others took quieter paths but found strength in knowing someone else had stood up first. A few tell me they're still gathering evidence, still planning their exit, and my story reminds them they're not crazy for being strategic about protecting themselves. But I've also heard from people who disagreed with my methods, who think I was vindictive and cruel, who believe I should have taken the high road. To them, I would say this: the high road is not the same as the silent road. Taking the high road doesn't mean letting people harm you without consequences. It doesn't mean protecting abusers from accountability. It means acting with integrity and truth, which is exactly what I did. Every piece of evidence I showed was real. Every word I spoke was honest. If that truth was damaging to Marcus, that's because his actions were damaging. Not because I twisted anything or lied. I think there's also a gender dynamic at play in how people judge these situations. When men are publicly betrayed and they react with anger, society often nods along. Boys will be boys. He was hurt. He had a right to be upset. But when women respond to betrayal with strategic action, suddenly it's vindictive. It's crazy. It's too much. We're expected to be graceful victims, to suffer quietly and with dignity. Well, I chose a different kind of dignity, the dignity of refusing to be a victim at all. Marcus's story has become a cautionary tale in our social circles. I hear it referenced sometimes when people talk about trust and relationships. It's become shorthand for what happens when you underestimate someone, when you assume they'll tolerate anything because they always have before. People say things like, "Remember what happened to Marcus," when warning friends about taking partners for granted. And while I never wanted to be famous for my husband's betrayal, I'm not unhappy that his downfall serves as a reminder that actions have consequences. The most healing aspect of the entire experience has been reclaiming my narrative. For 15 years, Marcus controlled how people saw me, how they saw our relationship. He presented a version of reality that made him look good, and I went along with it. But that night, I took back control of my story. I told the truth in my own words. And in doing so, I transformed from someone things happened to into someone who happened to things. That shift from passive victim to active agent of my own life has been everything. Section 9. Life now is different in ways both big and small. I live alone in an apartment downtown in a space that's entirely mine. Every piece of furniture I chose, every color on the walls reflects my taste. There are no compromises, no negotiations about what someone else wants. It's peaceful in a way my life with Marcus never was, even in the good years. I wake up without that knot of anxiety in my stomach, without the constant vigilance of trying to keep someone else happy. I've rebuilt my career too. Remember how I'd worked multiple jobs to support Marcus's dreams? Well, I finally invested in my own. I went back to school, finished the degree I'd abandoned when he needed me. I started a consulting business helping small companies with project management and operations. It turns out all those years of managing Marcus's life and business gave me skills that are actually valuable in the marketplace, and now I get paid for them properly, rather than just being expected to provide them for free. My relationships with family and friends have deepened. They tell me now that they were worried about me during my marriage, that they could see I wasn't happy even though I kept insisting everything was fine. They were just waiting for me to see it too. Some of them admitted they never really liked Marcus, that he always seemed more interested in what people could do for him than in genuine connection. It's validating to hear, even though part of me wishes someone had shaken me awake years earlier, but I also understand why they didn't. You can't force someone to leave a relationship before they're ready. I had to get there on my own, had to have my eyes opened in a way I couldn't ignore or explain away. Marcus's messages about me, his plans to discard me after using me one last time, that was my wake-up call. Harsh, painful, but ultimately necessary. Sometimes you need to see the absolute worst of someone before you can break free from the illusion of who you thought they were. I don't hate Marcus anymore. Hate requires energy and emotional investment, and I refuse to give him any more of either. I feel something closer to indifference now, with maybe a touch of pity. He's living somewhere else, with someone else I heard, building a life that's much smaller than the one he had. He lost his business, his reputation, his position in the community. He gambled it all for an affair and some excitement, and he lost. That's on him. I didn't make him cheat. I didn't make him lie. I just made sure everyone knew what he'd done. There are moments, though, where I think about the Sarah I used to be. The one who believed in forever, who trusted completely, who thought love meant sacrificing everything for someone else. I feel tender toward that version of me. She was naive, yes, but she was also hopeful and generous and brave in her own way. It took courage to love as fully as she did, even if it was misplaced. I don't regret having been her. I just couldn't stay her. The version of me that exists now is harder in some ways, more cautious, more guarded, but she's also more whole. She knows her worth isn't determined by whether someone else values her. She knows her voice matters. She knows she can survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. These lessons came at a high price, but they've made me someone I actually like and respect. And that's worth more than any marriage to Marcus could have ever been. Section 10. If I could speak to someone who's where I was 2 years ago, someone who suspects betrayal but isn't sure, someone who's uncovering lies and feeling their world crack apart, here's what I would tell them. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're paranoid or overreacting. Your intuition is trying to protect you. Listen to it. Second, gather evidence before you make any moves. I know it feels awful to snoop, to investigate someone you love, but if they've betrayed your trust, they've forfeited their right to privacy in that area. Document everything. Save messages, take screenshots, keep records. You might need them later, legally or just for your own validation when you start doubting yourself. Third, get professional help. A lawyer, a therapist, both if possible. You need someone on your side who can think clearly when your emotions are overwhelming. Who can help you understand your options and protect your interests. This isn't something you should try to navigate alone. Fourth, and this is crucial, decide what you want your outcome to be. Not what's easiest, not what will cause the least disruption, but what will let you look at yourself in the mirror with respect. Do you want to try to save the relationship? Do you want to leave quietly? Do you want to expose what happened? There's no right answer, only what's right for you. But be honest with yourself about what you need to heal. Fifth, remember that their betrayal is not about your worth. It's about their character. Marcus didn't cheat because I wasn't good enough. He cheated because he was selfish and entitled and willing to hurt someone who loved him. That's a reflection of who he is, not who I am. The same is true for you. What was done to you says nothing about your value as a person. Sixth, prepare for it to be messy. Whether you expose betrayal publicly like I did or handle it privately, it's going to hurt. People will have opinions. Some will support you, others will judge you. You might lose relationships you thought were solid, but you'll also discover who your real friends are. And honestly, clearing out the people who don't truly have your back is a gift, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. 7th, know that healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong and clear and confident in your choices. Other days you'll doubt everything, miss what you had, wonder if you overreacted. Both are normal. Healing from betrayal takes time. Be patient with yourself. Don't rush the process or pretend you're okay when you're not. 8th, use your experience to grow. This sounds terrible when you're in the thick of pain, but eventually, what happened to you can become a source of strength and wisdom. It can teach you about boundaries, about self-respect, about what you will and won't accept. These lessons are valuable even though you wish you'd learned them some other way. 9th, don't let bitterness consume you. Yes, you have every right to be angry. Betrayal is enraging, but don't let that anger become your whole identity. Don't let what someone else did define the rest of your life. Use the anger to fuel your healing and your growth, then let it go. The best revenge isn't elaborate exposure or public humiliation. It's building a life so good that you barely remember to care what your betrayer is doing. And 10th, believe that you can survive this. I know it feels impossible right now. I know you think this pain will never end, but it will. Not completely, maybe. The scar will always be there. But scars are just proof that you were hurt and you healed. One day you'll wake up and realize you didn't think about them first thing. One day you'll laugh genuinely at something and remember you're capable of joy. One day you'll be grateful that the relationship ended because it made space for something better. I promise you, that day will come. Section 11. 2 years out, I can see my situation with more clarity than I could in the immediate aftermath. Yes, what Marcus did was terrible. Yes, the betrayal cut deep. But staying would have been worse. Living the rest of my life with someone who saw me as a convenience rather than a partner, who mocked me behind my back, who was just waiting for the right time to throw me away, that would have been the real tragedy. In a strange way, finding those messages was a gift. It was painful, devastating actually, but it woke me up. It forced me to see the truth I'd been avoiding, and it gave me the evidence I needed to protect myself legally and emotionally. If I'd just suspected the affair without proof, Marcus would have gaslit me. He would have convinced me I was imagining things, made me doubt my own sanity. But I had his words in black and white. I had undeniable proof. That made all the difference. The public nature of how things ended still divides people's opinions. Some think I'm a hero, others think I'm a villain. Most fall somewhere in between, understanding my anger but questioning my methods. I've made peace with that. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I wasn't trying to be an example or make a statement about betrayal and revenge. I was just a hurt woman who refused to protect the man who hurt her. Everything else that came from it, the viral attention, the platform, the cautionary tale Marcus became, those were consequences, not goals. If Marcus had treated me with even basic respect, if he'd been honest about his unhappiness and asked for a divorce directly, things would have been so different. It would have hurt, but it would have been clean. We could have separated amicably, divided our assets fairly, and moved on with our lives. But that's not what he did. He lied. He cheated. He used me. He planned to humiliate me by discarding me right after making me organize his party. He chose cruelty over honesty, so I chose truth over his comfort. I think that's what people miss when they criticize my response. They act like I randomly decided to blow up someone's life for entertainment. But I was reacting to sustained, deliberate betrayal, to lies that had gone on for over a year, to contempt for me that Marcus had been expressing to his affair partner, to financial misconduct that could have left me with nothing if I hadn't uncovered it. My reaction was proportional to his actions. It just happened to be very public, which made people uncomfortable. Society is strange about women's anger. We're supposed to be hurt quietly, to process our pain in private, to never make anyone else uncomfortable with our emotions. When we don't do that, when we express our hurt and rage openly, we're labeled as unstable, vindictive, crazy. But anger is a healthy response to being mistreated. Expressing it doesn't make you wrong, it makes you human. And refusing to hide it doesn't make you a villain, It makes you honest. Section 12. The moral of this story, if there has to be one, isn't about revenge. It's about self-respect. It's about refusing to accept treatment that diminishes you. It's about recognizing your own worth even when the person who promised to honor it doesn't. Marcus thought I would just accept whatever he did because I always had before. He thought I was weak. He underestimated me. That was his biggest mistake. But this is also a story about consequences. We live in a world where people, especially people in positions of power or privilege, often avoid the natural consequences of their actions. They hurt others and move on without accountability. They betray and lie and manipulate, and as long as they're discreet about it, their reputations remain intact. Sometimes someone needs to be brave enough or angry enough or hurt enough to say, "No, not this time. This time there will be consequences." I've also learned that closure is something you give yourself, not something someone else provides. I never got an apology from Marcus. Not a real one anyway. He sent some messages after the party that sort of apologized for hurting me, but mostly focused on how unfair my response was. He couldn't take responsibility for his actions without immediately pivoting to making himself the victim. That's just who he is. For a while, that bothered me. I wanted him to understand what he'd done, to feel genuine remorse, to acknowledge the pain he'd caused. But eventually, I realized I didn't need that from him. His inability to see his own faults, his refusal to take real accountability, those were his problems, not mine. I could move forward without his understanding or apology. In fact, his lack of growth made it easier to let go, because it confirmed that leaving was the right choice. The life I'm building now is mine in a way my life with Marcus never was. It's smaller in some ways. I'm not going to fancy parties or rubbing elbows with influential people. I'm not playing the role of the successful businessman's wife anymore. But it's authentic. Every choice I make is based on what I want, what brings me peace, what aligns with my values. And that authenticity is worth more than any grand lifestyle built on lies. I date now, like I mentioned, but carefully. I pay attention to patterns, to consistency between words and actions. I don't ignore red flags or make excuses for behavior that doesn't sit right. I trust my instincts in a way I didn't before, and I'm okay being alone if the alternative is being with someone who doesn't truly value me. I learned the hard way that being alone is far better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. The strangest part of this entire experience has been becoming a public figure of sorts. My name is still associated with that party, with what people call the ultimate revenge reveal. People recognize me sometimes, want to talk about it, want to share their own stories. It's weird being known for the worst moment of your life, but I try to use that recognition for good, to encourage others to stand up for themselves, to remind people that staying in bad situations doesn't make you strong. Sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. Section 13. There's one more thing I want to address, and that's the question of forgiveness. People ask me all the time if I've forgiven Marcus. They say forgiveness is for me, not for him, that holding on to anger will only hurt me. And I understand what they mean. But I also think forgiveness is more complicated than that. I've forgiven myself. For being naive, for ignoring warning signs, for staying too long, for believing his lies. I've released the self-blame and the shame that came with being betrayed. I understand now that I did the best I could with the information I had. That's not my fault. That's human. As for forgiving Marcus, I'm not sure I need to. Forgiveness implies a relationship that continues, a connection that matters. But Marcus and I have no relationship anymore. He's just someone I used to know, someone who taught me painful but valuable lessons. I don't wish him harm. I don't sit around fantasizing about more revenge. But I also don't need to absolve him or make peace with what he did. I can just move on without him, which is what I'm doing. I think sometimes we push people, especially women, to forgive because it makes everyone else more comfortable. If the hurt person forgives, then everyone can stop feeling awkward about what happened. We can all pretend things are resolved and move forward. But real healing doesn't work on everyone else's timeline. And it doesn't require you to make your abuser feel better about what they did. So I hold space for all of it. The anger that still flares up sometimes when I think about how he talked about me to Vanessa, the sadness over the years I wasted, the pride in how I handled my exit, the hope for the future I'm building. All of these feelings coexist. They don't cancel each other out. And they don't need to be resolved into some neat, forgiving package for other people's comfort. What I've found is that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And that's where I am with Marcus now. I don't love him, obviously, but I also don't hate him anymore. I simply don't think about him much. When I do, it's with detachment, like remembering a character in a book I once read. He was important to my story, but the story moved on. I moved on. The life lesson here, the thing I hope people take away from my experience, is this: you teach people how to treat you. For years, I taught Marcus that he could lie to me and I'd believe him, that he could neglect me and I'd stay, that he could disrespect me and I'd accept it. Then, in one night, I taught him something different. I taught him that there are consequences to betrayal, that underestimating someone is dangerous, that every choice you make can come back to you in ways you never expected. Section 14. Marcus thought he was in control of the narrative. He thought he could do what he wanted in private while maintaining his perfect public image. He thought he could use me to build his success and then toss me aside when he was done, and for a long time, he was right. He did control things, but control is temporary. Truth is permanent. Eventually, truth finds a way out. Sometimes it needs help. I just gave it a push. I want to be clear about something, though. I'm not encouraging everyone to publicly expose their partners at birthday parties. That was my choice, my situation, my decision based on the specific circumstances I was facing. What I am encouraging is for people to value themselves enough to not tolerate betrayal, to not shrink themselves to accommodate someone else's bad behavior, to use their voice when they've been wronged. How you choose to do that, publicly or privately, dramatically or quietly, is entirely up to you. Just do something. Don't suffer in silence to protect someone who didn't protect you. The aftermath of that night changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm less trusting, yes, but also less naive. I'm more cautious, but also more confident. I know what I'm capable of surviving now. I know I can rebuild after devastation. I know my voice has power. These aren't lessons anyone wants to learn the hard way. But since I had to learn them, I'm grateful for the strength they've given me. I also have more compassion for other people's struggles now. When someone tells me about a bad relationship, I don't judge them for staying. I don't ask why they don't just leave. I understand that it's complicated, that love and hope and fear and logistics all tangle together in ways that make leaving difficult. I just encourage them to value themselves, to document what's happening, to make plans, even if they're not ready to execute them yet, to know that they deserve better. My story has a relatively happy ending. I got out. I rebuilt. I'm okay. But not everyone's story ends that way. Some people stay in bad relationships for decades. Some leave but end up in another bad relationship right after. Some expose betrayal and face legal consequences or financial ruin. I was lucky in a lot of ways. I had evidence. I had a good lawyer. I didn't have children complicating things. I had the resources to start over. Not everyone has those advantages. So while my story might be inspiring, I don't want it to become prescriptive. You don't have to blow up your partner's birthday party to be taking your life back. You don't have to make a public statement to have self-respect. You just have to decide, for yourself, that you matter. That your feelings matter. That you deserve to be treated with honesty and respect. Everything else flows from that decision. Closing. Looking back at everything now, 2 years after that party, I can say this: Marcus's betrayal broke my heart, but saved my life. It woke me up from a dream that had turned into a nightmare. It forced me to see what I'd been refusing to acknowledge. And ultimately, it freed me to become someone stronger, someone clearer about her worth, someone who will never again tolerate being diminished. Was my revenge dramatic? Yes. Was it calculated? Absolutely. Was it fair? I believe so. Marcus made his choices freely. I simply ensured he faced the natural consequences of those choices instead of being protected from them. If those consequences were severe, that's because his actions were severe. The real victory wasn't the public humiliation, though I won't pretend that didn't feel satisfying in the moment. The real victory was reclaiming my life, standing up for myself, refusing to be the silent, convenient victim, choosing truth over comfort, finding my voice and using it loudly and clearly. To anyone out there facing betrayal right now, to anyone questioning whether what they're experiencing is really that bad, to anyone making excuses for someone who doesn't deserve them, I want you to hear this: you are worth more than lies. You are worth more than half-hearted love. You are worth more than being someone's second choice or backup plan. You deserve honesty, respect, and genuine affection. If you're not getting those things, you have every right to walk away. And if, in the process of walking away, you decide to make some noise, to tell the truth, to refuse to protect someone who didn't protect you, that doesn't make you vindictive. It makes you brave. My husband thought I'd ruin his party. But I didn't ruin anything. He did. I just made sure everyone knew about it. His own actions ruined him. I was simply the messenger, and I'm not sorry for delivering that message. Not then, not now, not ever.